Gentlemen, welcome to the Source Material Podcast. That is correct. You are here at our 230. Hold on.
God damn it.
I think it's 235.
Of the two of us, you're supposed to be the one that's prepared.
263? 264? 265. 265th episode right here on the W2M network. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So Mark Radulich tells me, hey, I'm doing a thing this week, and we need to kind of put a book together with it to synergize, as the man likes to say. This week, we're talking Lost in Space, the first 5 issues of the Innovation comic book run, which I didn't even know existed. Mark Radulich is right here, and he's going to tell us why we're talking a Lost in Space book tonight. Tell him, Mark.
Because Season 2 of Lost in Space on Netflix dropped, and we'll be reviewing it this week on TV Party tonight. And on Thursday, myself and Sean Comer of Ye Olde Comer Codex will be putting the 1998 Lost in Space on trial.
And I like that movie. I thought it was cool. A lot of people give that one crap, so it's going on trial.
The rest of the world thinks it's hot garbage.
Oh, yeah, that's what I hear. Are you prosecuting or are you defending?
I don't know. I'll probably insist that I defend it and make Sean prosecute it. Okay. But we actually haven't talked about it yet. Even though it's in 3 days.
Oh, yes. You guys are on top of it. All right. Well, that's fine. So, Innovation Comics. Like I said, I didn't know these guys existed. These guys have a ton of licensed comics underneath their umbrella at the time. I remember seeing ads for, oh my goodness. Did you see I know you did. The Phantom of the Opera ads.
Not Phantom of the Opera. I saw A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I wanted to make the joke here that that Innovation Comics would soon become IDW.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. Because they have a bunch of adaptations. Okay, that's great. They do have some original series under their belt too. But adaptations, Beauty and the Beast, which I wonder if that was remember the 90s series? It was the late 80s. Yeah, it was the 1990 series with Linda Hamilton. Do you remember that TV series?
Beauty and the Beast with Linda Hamilton?
Yes.
No.
You do not remember that. Linda Hamilton, Ron Perlman as the Beast.
Oh, my.
I'm sorry. It came out in 87. From 87 to August 4th, 1990. So it was 3 seasons. Then we have Child's Play, Dark Shadows, Incarnations of Immortality. I didn't know that was an adaptation. Okay, that was a fantasy series by Piers Anthony. Interview with a Vampire, Lost in Space, which we are about to talk about tonight. Nightmare on Elm Street, Quantum Leap, Mark Radulich, Quantum Leap, Queen of the Damned, The Vampire Lestat, Psycho. Yeah, I saw that ad too. So anyway, there you go. There's some adaptations of Innovation. So Innovation Comics, get this, not too far from my old hometown, which is where I'm at right now. I've never left.
In Langford, Ohio?
Yes, these guys were based out of Wheeling, West Virginia, co-founded by David Campiti in 1988 after writing a business proposal and raising $400,000 to finance its launch. Innovation became number 4 in market share, below Marvel Comics, DC Comics, and Dark Horse Comics. But it ended up going out of business, defunct, in 1994. So Wheeling, West Virginia, that's pretty cool. Mark Radulich, did you ever watch Lost in Space, the TV show?
No.
When you saw it on TV, I'm sure it crossed your TV and you just immediately changed it.
I actually never really saw too much of this in syndication. Obviously, both of us are too young to have watched it when it debuted.
Yeah.
It was like in the 60s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 1965 to 1968.
Well, this may or may not shock you, but I was not born yet. No, I was born in 1976. When I would have been old enough for TV to have registered would have been the early 80s. We had HBO at the time, so I was too busy waking up on a Saturday morning while my parents were still sleeping and watching Conan or Red Sonja and whatever boobage I could see.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about.
I hear you, sir. I hear you. I'm trying to find out what networks it was syndicated on.
As far as like other stuff I watched at the time, I watched wrestling and cartoons. So weirdly enough, I was aware of the Black Hole, and I remember watching that as a kid. Mm-hmm. The Disney movie, not the porn.
Yeah. Of course, there's one out there. It's probably got 5 sequels too.
I hope. But people listen to this going, boy, does he talk a lot about porn.
Yes, sir.
You should see this comic. I feel like this was this is Lost in Space, the porn, the illustrative comic.
Lost in Space, then in real tiny letters, between her boobs. I didn't see that there the first time. Wait a second.
Innovation brings you Lost in Cleavage.
Yes, sir.
To answer your question in a very simple, straightforward way, I tended to not watch a lot of live action stuff when I was that young, unless it was like wrestling. When I got a little bit older and I was able to discover like the A-Team and Knight Rider, that was more my jam. But even then, I tended to drift away from stuff that seemed too old. And, you know, as growing up in the 80s, I would have looked back at a show like the 60s. Like, I didn't even like the Brady Bunch.
Yeah. I hear you.
You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to say. Like, stuff that seemed too old, I tended to drift away from. Was like, no, I want new. I want now. I want happening. I want, hit me to the jive. This is a long way around to say I did not watch Lost in Space. So when Netflix said they were going to do a new series, I actually wasn't that excited about it. And it took me a long time to watch it. But what ends up happening ultimately is there's stuff that I don't really have any interest in talking about or watching or don't have time for. And somebody in the Rattledge and Broadcasting family would be like, when are we talking about Yuts and Futs? And I'll be like, well, I wasn't going to watch Yuts and Futs. They're like, well, we want to talk to you about Yuts and Futs.
Yep.
So inevitably, I watch Yuts and Futs, and that's how we came to watch Lost in Space, the first season, which ended up being really good, a lot better than I thought it was going to be. So when season 2 dropped, I was like, okay, let's dedicate a whole week to this. Let's look at the whole breadth of Lost in Space stuff out there. And I was curious to see if there had been a comic ever produced, because there's a fucking comic made about everything.
Oh yeah,
and the porn version of it.
Oh yeah.
So. There's a lot of comics out there, a lot of licensed stuff. And I found this gem, Innovation Comics Lost in Space, 18 issues.
18. Now, we only did the first 5. Originally, we were going to do 6, but we realized that the 6th issue was a 2-parter, and the second part would have went into a big special edition, which I'm sure was a lot of pages. You get your money's worth for these guys when you look at the page count and how much you paid, really. I mean, I think we were looking at the first issue was 38 pages, so that's a lot of stuff there. But I say money's worth by saying you get a lot of product for your money. As for story, my goodness, I remember that first issue being like laden with text. So, yeah, I remember that when I went to my babysitter's, like, she just let us watch TV, and usually she'd have it on Nickelodeon or something like that. And I swear that this was on Nickelodeon like early in the morning, which, okay, I can't find anything that kind of supports that, but I can tell you that according to the wiki, it says it was in syndication. In the year of 1979, Ted Turner brings it back to WTBS Superstation, and it goes into syndication for the next 5 years on that station. So that is probably where I saw it. I didn't watch a whole lot of it. I think I remember maybe watching an episode or two. Just like you said, it's the 60s. The first series, according to what I see here, the first season was actually black and white, and then I think the next 2 were in color. But either way, it just looked hokey. It was the 60s. I wasn't into it. So all this talk here, let's talk about, I'll quickly give our listeners an idea of what Lost in Space is. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know what it is.
Swiss Family Robinson in space.
There you go. That's pretty much what it's based on. There's also some Gold Key comics that were titled Space Family Robinson that had some inspiration here for Irwin Allen, I believe is his name. Created and produced by Irwin Allen. And aired between 65 and 68. So let's go ahead real quick. I'll run down the characters. All these characters end up on a ship, and ladies and gentlemen, they get lost in space. That's right. Title speaks for itself. So we have Dr. or Professor John Robinson, the expedition commander and the father of the Robinson children. Robinson is an astrophysicist who also specializes in applied planetary geology. Dr. Maureen Robinson, a biochemist who is often seen preparing meals, tending the garden, and helping with light construction while adding a voice of compassion. Major Don West, the pilot of the Jupiter 2. Judy Robinson, the oldest child of the Robinsons. Now I'm talking about in the comic, by the way. In the show, Penny was pretty young, so I don't. Penny Robinson, the middle child, an imaginative 11-year-old who loves animals and classical music. She does love animals. Will Robinson, Billy Mooney, who he actually shows up and writes 2 issues in these first 5, and
he's
that was
working out a lot of sexual frustration in this comic.
Well, hold on now. I don't know if that's him writing. There's 2 issues here that he writes, or if it is the artist's interpretation of what's going on, because it's evident in the 2 issues that he writes, but it's evident in like the first and second issue as well. He writes, I think, 3 and 4, and issue 5 actually is like the one comic out of these 5 where we don't have any boobs. There's not a whole lot of cleavage. There's no ripped clothes. There's
I was going to say 4 more than makes up for it, though, and all the rapiness that goes on.
It's pretty creepy. But Will Robinson, the youngest child, a precocious 9-year-old in the first season, he is a child prodigy in electronics and computer technology. Dr. Zachary Smith, Jonathan Harris. And I'm going to learn you one here, Mark. You may not know, but if not, or if you do, our listeners are going to learn something. So Dr. Zachary Smith, he's like the evil. His plan was to kind of sabotage, I believe, the launch of Jupiter 2.
He's duplicitous.
That's a great word right there. Acting as Alpha Control's flight surgeon in the first episode, he is later referred to as Doctor of Intergalactic Environmental Psychology, an expert in cybernetics, and an enemy agent. His attempt to sabotage the mission strands him aboard the Jupiter 2. And then, of course, we have the robot. Robot is a B9 model environmental control robot, which he finds almost looks like he gets killed. Like in the second page, the robot gets killed in the second page of the first comic. Well, luckily, he's just a robot. You can put him back together. The machine was endowed with superhuman strength and futuristic weaponry. All right, I want to tell you about Jonathan Harris real quick. Now, there's a really interesting story here regarding Jonathan Harris and his casting on the show. Now, I know we're talking a lot about the show here, but I want to get this out there because I find this fascinating. So at the point where Jonathan Harris joined the show, now Jonathan Harris is a really accomplished actor. I mean, this guy has a lot of film under his belt. He's got a lot of stage work under his belt. And so when they come to him and ask him to become part of the show, it turns out that they had already sealed the deal with the rest of the actors and actresses that were going to be on the show prior to talking to him. And there was an issue with billing. So, if you've heard the word top billing, I'm sure, right, Mark? Tell me about top billing.
It's when your name is at the top of the billboard.
That's right. Unfortunately, this accomplished actor, since he was the last to sign a contract, was going to get last billing. All right. So he didn't like that too well. So during the contract signing and throughout the series, you will see him credited as a special guest star throughout the whole television series. He shows up at the end, but it always shows up as special guest star. And he talked about how this came about. And I want to read this real quick. This is his conversation or his side of what happened. So he says, I called Erwin Allen, and said, I solved your billing problem. He goes, what? I said, I will accept last position. Special guest star Jonathan Harris. So he goes, the next 20 minutes, you would not have believed. You goddamn actors. You can't act anyway. None of you are worth a nickel, and I've got to pay all you bastards. And on and on. I didn't open my mouth, and I just sat there and listened. You can't act, any of you. You're the worst of all. You can't act at all. On and on. I took a deep breath and said, okay, and hung up. Amazing. Amazing. That was the first time that that kind of out-V billing occurred. Out-Vi. I'm going to go with out-Vi. Out-Vi billing occurred. Now, of course, billing is total madness with special appearance of, with a cameo appearance of. I started the whole crap. You have Jonathan Harris to thank when you see a special appearance or special guest star on any TV show. He was the first to do it. Oh, by the way, here's a little trivia for your discussion about the 1998 on trial. Harris refused to make a cameo appearance in the 1998 motion picture version of Lost in Space, unlike many of his co-stars in the original series. He announced, I've never played a bit part in my life, and I'm not going to start now. However, he did make emotional appearances for the film. So there you go. So evil actor on stage, and my goodness, he's got a personality off stage. So, all right, Mark, here we go. Let's get into the comic. So our first issue is Seduction of the Innocent. Lost in Space, Issue 1, Seduction of the Innocent. Scripted by Matt Thompson and Dave Campiti. illustrated by Eddie Newell and Mark Jones, colored by Scott Rockwell, which is pretty much our introduction to the Innovation comic book series coverage of Lost in Space, where the family are stuck on a planet and battling a bunch of vegetative monsters. That's pretty much about it. I think this is where we learn that Dr. Smith, which this does not come to a conclusion in our first 5 issues in any way, but Dr. Smith, after the robot gets destroyed, finds a memory chip, and he sees that this memory chip includes basically the whole backstory of how everybody came on the Jupiter 2, including his own, which shows that he was, just like you said, duplicitous. He was getting ready to sabotage the Jupiter 2, and he wants to keep this a secret from the rest of the crew, pretty much. And we get our introduction to all the characters, and I won't rehash all that, but there's a bit of a plot with trying to get off of the planet before the vegetative monsters come after him, and they're able to do that. We end issue 1 with the ship hovering in the air of the atmosphere of the planet, and they're safe. I've got 3 notes here for issue 1. Oh my goodness, the ripped clothes.
I said to you offline, I said, this is drawn, at the very least drawn. I mean, maybe you can make the argument like, well, he wrote it pretty straightforward, but the artist just went to fucking town on his story. But this looks like a Harlequin romance novel set in space, made as comic. Mm-hmm. It's incredible.
That first, like, even on the front cover, it's got, I think it's Penny, who's trying to get away from these vegetable tentacles that are coming after her, and half of her top's ripped, and of course there's a ton of cleavage showing. So,
well, of course. So basically, this first issue is the Lost in Space crew in Plants vs. Zombies.
Yeah, I guess pretty much. We catch up here. I don't know how many years this takes place. I can't remember if it's like 3 or 4 years after the series, but maybe less than that. Maybe it's only like a couple years, because the characters have grown. Penny is not shown as a young girl here. She's obviously the youngest or the middle child, but she looks, how old would you say Penny Robinson is in this series? Like 17, 18 years old?
Given the jokes we're making in this and what happens to her, I'm going to go with 18 plus.
Plus, I like it. So yeah, you can tell that the characters have grown a little bit. Major West and Dr. Smith do not get along at all.
Holy cow. All 5 issues of them just fighting like cats and dogs. And here's the thing. I love the way Dr. Smith is written in this, because he's like such a chicken shit cowardly heel.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he is.
The way he's written, he's like challenging Marky Bingo cards, everybody. Gorgeous George. Like, it's like Don West goes to grab Adam, goes to snatch him. He's like, don't touch me. So funny. If
you watch, I would say that, as we go through the 5 issues here, Dr. Zachary Smith was the one character that I remember strictly from the series as being one of the most standout personalities. And he is portrayed in this pretty accurately compared to what I remember him in the series as. He would cut you down with words any chance that he has to do that. He would do it. And he does it in this series.
He's doing this villain thing where he uses a lot of big words, and he's like, everybody on this ship is a monkey. None of you can approach my intellect. They're like, okay, but that box needs to be lifted up. And he's like, oh, and fanning himself and clutching his pearls.
One of my favorite parts in this is and it's not in this issue, but I think it's in the 5th issue that we talk about. But skipping ahead to that, just to kind of support your chicken shit argument, oh man, a rock, hit the outside. Someone has to go out and get it, and all of a sudden, Dr. Smith is like, my back. It's like,
my neck and my back.
Come on, dude. So one of the things that I learned, because I read the inside cover and in the back cover if they had some stuff in there, and usually they would do a good job of kind of getting you prepped for what was going to be in the issue. In this first issue, when they put the robot back together, the robot's a big staple. I mean, Look, if you saw the Lost in Space robot sitting out somewhere, you'd be like, oh, I know where that's from. That's from Lost in Space. Yeah. The big thing was that the robot gets destroyed, like I said, in the second page or something. So they put it back together, and they start adding a ton of extra stuff that was not in the TV series. He's got a saw blade, he's got laser guns, he's got all these cool gadgets. I guess the creators or the creators of the series of the TV or the comic series was getting some crap. People were like, hey, where did all these things go? Because as we progress in the later issues, those changes don't show back up again on the robot. And it turns out that their licensing agreement with Viacom said that they could not change the look of the robot. So
Really?
it gets destroyed in the first issue, and they can't change the look of the robot as it moves forward. So what they said was all those things are still there. They just go back inside his body. So that was their way of getting around that.
Yeah, it's like, why doesn't R2D2 use any of the stuff he uses in the prequel trilogies? Because they didn't give it to him then.
That's right. That's right. So that's what they did here. They just said, we changed it. We changed everything. He's still got all these cool gadgets, but what will happen is when he uses them, they'll go right back in. So the look of the robot doesn't change. So anything else on issue 1, or you ready for issue 2? Okay, here we go. Issue 2, The Cavern of Idyllic Summers Lost. Written by George Broderick Jr., painted by Matt Thompson. Issue 2. Now this is as best as I could put it for people who read comic books. This is the Black Mercy episode. The Black Mercy comic, where the team, a crew, which is I think Dawn and Maureen, Dr. Smith, and Judy are out surveying the planet. A storm rolls along. They decide not to go to the rover. So instead they go into this cave. And it turns out this cave, as soon as they step in there, they start getting hit with this stuff from these stalactites hanging down from the top. And it immediately puts them to sleep. And they dream about their, I guess, best lives initially. They start to look at what some of the more happier moments of their lives are. What they don't realize is that this cave is trying to, I guess, eat them. Is probably the best way to say it, because what you find out is that this stuff that's been dripping on them from these stalactites is actually starting to cover. Yes, it's dripping all over. It's an essence cave, dripping essence all over them. Yeah, this calcium, I think is what she said. This calcium buildup starts creeping up their bodies, and I guess it's slowly going to dissolve them. And the only thing that wakes them up, they start to experience the sadder parts of their lives. So then there was some pretty dark crap that happened in this issue. At one point, I think Maureen miscarries. Mm-hmm. She has a miscarriage, and I remember when she gets back to the ship, she talks about how she, when she was envisioning or hallucinating, she remembered having the miscarriage of John Jr., which that's pretty dark. Judy, who was an actress, ends up finding a friend of hers, a fellow actress, dead of a suicide in a bathtub. And then Dr. Smith's wife, which by the end of this issue, the last panel, if I remember right, is Dr. Smith crying because he realized kind of what happened and what he missed. His wife, now some of the stuff is fiction, I guess I would say, because as they live these lives, things start to go in different paths than what they actually took in real life. Dr. Smith, he's dreaming about his wife, who ends up actually getting assigned to the Jupiter 2, and his mission to sabotage the Jupiter 2 is successful, and he blows up the ship with his own wife on it. I mean, that's pretty dark. And then who was it? Oh, Don West. Do you remember Don West? He's sitting there watching, like everything's going great, and they finally get to where there's this shuttle launch, and they're watching this shuttle go up into space, and it explodes, and it's the fucking Challenger.
Yeah, I remember that. That was rough to watch. That was rough to read.
Somebody wakes up the rest of them, and they're able to escape the cave. But yeah, at the end of the episode, I think somebody, like, I imagine it's either Don or the dad. What the hell is his name? John Robinson. Yeah, John Robinson, like, kind of gives the doctor crap, like, calling him a shitheel coward again. Mm-hmm. And he starts to kind of recollect on what actually was going through his head, and he doesn't tell them what happened, but he was sad because I assume he missed his wife from back home. He's stuck out in space. But anyway, there you go. Black Mercy issue.
I feel like there's always an episode like this where everyone, like every science fiction, science fantasy TV show, there's always an episode where everyone's like hallucinating their best life, or there's always some like throwaway everything's a dream episode. All
right. Anything else on the Black Mercy episode?
No. Onward and upwards.
Onward and upwards. Issues 3 and 4. Do not go gentle into that good night, and people are strange when you're a stranger. Story by Kevin Burns and Bill Mooney. Script by Bill Mooney. Art by Michael Dudkowitz. Colors by Scott Rockwell. This was written by child actor. No, he's not a child at this point. Bill Mummy, who played Will Robinson on the TV series. So this is a neat one. This is the one where they end up having to crash land on a planet like it seems like they always have to do.
Oh my God, I love this one.
And they show up on a planet that is
fantastic.
Yeah, they show up on a planet that's inhabited. Some aliens show up. Maureen gets injured after they blast. I think either they blasted or something happens where there's an electrical discharge. It knocks everybody out. Maureen, the mom, is injured, so they have to communicate with these aliens in order to try and get her help. Now, these aliens are very civilized. I remember there's even a freaking alien like reporter sitting there talking about, holy shit, the aliens have landed. You know, we're right here covering it, pretty much. They bring the Robinsons out, and there's a whole plot about how there's a world leader who's going to use their appearance and threaten other civilizations with the weaponry supposedly on the ship, which it turns out the Jupiter 2 is not a ship that has a ton of weaponry on it. But regardless, this leader was going to do that. And the Robinsons end up being captured, able to escape, make it back to the ship, and are able to get off planet. So,
first of all, I love the idea of, turning the alien invasion storyline on its head and making us the aliens. I love the idea that somewhere out there are aliens who act and sound and talk just like us. Mm-hmm. Along with the same stupidity and prejudices and all of that. I love the bit of they're so untrustworthy. As soon as the human beings get off the ship, like, hey, we come in peace. They're like, yeah, fuck your peace, chick.
You're coming with us.
Yeah, that was just all good stuff. And of course they're using it as like a propaganda tool, like in the Civil War and things like that. The Robinsons are basically like, just say yes to everything long enough for us to get back on the ship and hightail it out of here.
Yeah.
This was a really, the first issue, you're just sort of getting a feel of what this is all going to be all about. Mm-hmm. And it's about science and fiction and cleavage. The second issue was kind of like a throwaway issue. It's more character building stuff. Excuse me, but nothing really happens in it. It's the third and the fourth issue where you get a good, solid 2-part story that really gives you a lot of meat on the bone. They're having an adventure. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's the first time since we started the series where they're really having an adventure, and there's some stakes and some tension at work here. So I really enjoyed issues 3 and 4.
Yeah, I think that, the big get there, I remember them talking, and Bill Mummy is on board. And if you notice, he's actually credited in the first 2 issues as Alpha Control Operator or Alpha Control Bill Mummy. So, okay. He had...
So this is the issue, though. This is the story where I was like, he's clearly working out his sexual frustrations. There is a scene in this where they literally try to rape one of the daughters, the aliens do.
I'm trying to think of which... Wait a second.
Pulling the top off of her and everything.
On the front freaking cover is that one, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay, so...
They're like a prisoner of war, and they're just like, you're my fuckhole. Like, hey.
I think. I remember it was what's her name? Judy. Judy takes all her clothes off in order to get sprayed.
They need to spray her. Yeah.
Yes.
And she's just like, let's get it over with already.
So she gets
fuck-ass nude.
She gets sprayed, and the other. I think they're trying to talk her into it says, I'm fine, it didn't. Okay, so this is Judy talking to Penny. I'm fine, it didn't hurt. Oh boy, this does not help it. Don't be afraid, Penny. Fear has nothing to do with it. I just don't want to be sprayed with some strange alien gas. And of course, the alien reaches down there and again grabs her suit, which is apparently made of aluminum foil, and it begins to rip off. And she's yelling, get your hands off of me. Yeah, these girls, I'm telling you, dude, cannot keep their cleavage from not showing. That is just like you said, it's clearly the artist or the writer. I wish I could say that
meant for a late teen adult audience.
Yeah, this is 91. We're on, I'd say, or smack dab in the middle of the comic book boom, where a lot of people were coming to the 90s for the grim, gritty, dark, and there are some busty chicks.
Yeah, it's the 90s, otherwise known as tits aplenty.
Yes, sir. It felt a little like that was something that they had to check off every issue. Okay, the girls We got the cleavage in, right? Yep, check. All right.
I have to imagine that was like an editorial decision. Like, we're Innovation Comics. We're this little rinky-dink operation. We've got a lot of licensed properties here. We got to sell some books. We're competing with Marvel and DC. Well, what can we do to separate us? Tits, sir. Just lots of tits all over the magazine.
Okay. There, you could see that there's some tension between Judy and Penny in regards to Don West here. Judy does not like Don paying any attention to Penny at all. And Penny, when everybody's knocked out, she's dreaming of Don coming over to her and saying, "I love you." And just that was the whole Harlequin romance novel, image that we saw, where she says, "Oh, take me now," or something along those lines. And it's like, come on. I mean,
yes, her heaving bosom against his rock hard chest.
Yeah. She's got it bad for Don. And like I said, if this thing went for a while, there had to have been like some serious issues between the two sisters and Don West. All right, so I think the big takeaway in issues 3 and 4 is that the crew of the Jupiter 2 want to get away from this planet as quick as possible as soon as they make their escape. And I wrote down the quote, all right? So here we go. This is what it says. I can't remember if it's John or if it's Don. I imagine it's Don. Don says, "I want to put as much distance between us and that planet as possible." The other person, I think it was Will. I don't know. But he goes, you know, John, in some ways that planet was a lot like Earth. And then somebody speaks up and says, "Exactly." So
they were trying to draw parallels for contemporary Earth, and again, we get a lot of this with the Orville, right? Where they take sort of contemporary issues, but they were like ascribe them to an alien race, so as to examine them without pointing directly at human stupidity.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, hey, transgenders are a thing now, and they're part of society, and I think we as a society are really struggling with this. We're really caught up in who can go into what bathroom. Make the male aliens try to transgender a baby so we can talk about this. Yes,
we've got to work that in somehow.
Okay.
Work it in there. Yeah, so the Robinsons, as much as they miss Earth, they found a place that was pretty similar, and all of a sudden they want the hell out. So who can blame them, though? I mean, these bad guys, the bad aliens, they weren't all bad. A general characterization, like if this was a TV series or a TV episode back in like the 60s, the generalization of all the aliens being bad would have probably been one of the things that they stuck to. But they actually get some help from a fellow alien who distracts the military, and the Robinsons are able to make it to the ship and escape. So not all bad, but hey, this wasn't the best place for the Robinsons to be. Final issue 5, The Perils of Penelope. Issue 5, The Perils of Penelope. Story and layouts by George Broderick Jr., illustrators Peter Murphy and Matt Thompson. So this was an interesting issue. I don't know if I've ever seen anything done like this before. This was a story told twice in the same issue. Okay, now I'm going to try and describe this as best as I can to our listeners.
Oh, so this is the one where like the art changes depending on the perspective.
Yes. The way that they did this was, imagine a comic book telling one story, okay? But just like you said, there's two perspectives. So each page is part of the story told two different ways. Now, I don't know if that was explained very well in the beginning, but I could tell you that when I was reading it, all of a sudden I was like, well, I am lost. Like 2 pages in, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And then I figured it out. So what you have here is, I think, John Robinson telling a story about an asteroid that lands on...
I love this one, too.
Yeah, this one's actually pretty good. The asteroid lands on the ship. They send Dr. Smith out to get the asteroid. The asteroid has these precious gems and minerals in it. But what we also find out is that there are a bunch of other asteroids that happen to be attracted to this little asteroid.
Yes, this little asteroid turns out to be a sentient being. And oh, by the way, it's also a baby.
Yes. Now, there's some interesting stuff about this because the way that it's told by John, it's very kind of scientific and matter of fact. So the mention of the rock or the asteroid being sentient, it's never mentioned in John Robinson's account. They say that it has some kind of magnetic properties that's drawing the rest of these asteroids to it. Anyway, they tell Dr. Smith, get that damn rock off of here. Well, of course, he's taken by greed. He sends a fucking pot for a plant out the jettison chute and to trick everybody thinking that he actually got rid of the rock. And then he takes the rock and shoves it under and puts it in a box. The rest of the asteroids are still following them, start pelting the Jupiter 2 to where the Jupiter 2 has to make an emergency landing on a planet, and the asteroids just keep coming down. And what they finally figure out, thanks to Judy and Will also steps in and helps out. They have to send the asteroid back up into space so that the rest of the asteroids will follow it. So, like I said, John Robinson's account, that's how I had to read it. I did not read Penny's. I read John's first. So I would read, switch page, just read his straight through. John's account is very matter of fact. It's very scientific. It's supposedly magnetism that draws these asteroids to it. They send it up. Luckily, Penny kind of saves the day. And Penny's account, just like you said, different artist, a little bit of a different take on the story. We see where Penny kind of talks about how she ascribes emotion to a lot of inanimate objects. Specifically, the first instance that I saw that was the robot. If you compare the two as you're going along, the robot's, like, his language is different than from what John Robinson sees. So she ascribes, like, the robot seems like it has emotion. In her account, the meteors are drawn with faces, and they're having full conversations out in space. That's not happening in John's account. Everything kind of lines up. She's the one that ends up finding the rock, but according to her, it was under a pillow, not in a box. Doesn't make much sense, but that's how the facts sometimes can be between two accounts of a story. And she ends up saving the day. And I think really at the end of this, you get a more insight to how John and Penny view the world. You also see at the end the love between a father and daughter. It's really touching because, like, at the end, I think John's kind of fell asleep in a chair after this whole debacle's done and over with, and Penny comes up and kisses him on the cheek. She talks about how even though her family, her parents, don't really give the kids a lot of credit, I think is what she says. She understands that her parents love them and try to protect them. As she leaves, fucking Dr. Smith is reading her diary at the final panel. He's reading her whole account of this. It was an interesting way to tell the story. It was two different art styles on the same page, which was pretty cool. Like I said, I don't know if I've ever seen a comic like this. This is the actual story where we have no Penny cleavage, no Judy cleavage, no Beaver cleavage.
Yeah. This is what I love about science fiction and fantasy. When you can think outside the box, you come up with some very creative things. When the rules of physics don't apply and you use your imagination, you can come up with some really fun ideas. What if there were asteroids flying through space that are sentient and families, and one of them happens to run into a ship? Now, the humans don't know that it's a sentient being. And, of course, one of them's got lizard brain and is like, I want all the precious minerals. And what would that look like, and how, and what would they have to do and everything? That's all great. I love that. So this was a really fun issue. I have to say, we stopped at number 5. I would, if Lost in Space on Netflix goes for another season, I would like to continue with this and do another 5-6 issues. I thought this was great. I like the painted art and a lot of it. That's what
that was going to be my next question, is what your thoughts of the art were.
Obviously this isn't, like photorealistic or anything like that, but I like a nice painted art piece. I think a lot of like the art that we see in a lot of Marvel, and especially Marvel, but a lot of Marvel and DC stuff tends to be kind of juvenile and simplistic, whereas these are very beautifully painted. We keep mentioning the Harlequin romance novels, and it's kind of a gag. But for those of you listening to this, wander into a bookstore. These are places where they sell books. The ones where they're free are called libraries. There's a difference. Talking to the kids out there. Okay. There's no more Borders bookstores. There's definitely Borders. We're trying to build a wall on ours. But bookstores, there's Books A Millions and there's Barnes and Nobles. And if you're a kid and you're listening to this, go to the Barnes and Nobles for a minute. I promise it will be worth your time. There's usually a Starbucks in there. You can get coffee and like a biscuit or something. But take a walk into the romance section. I'm not saying you have to buy anything, but like, look at those covers. These really beautifully painted covers of muscular men and buxom broads. And that's very much the style in which these are drawn and painted. The same brush techniques and everything. So I really appreciated that. I like that approach. it wasn't your traditional artwork for a comic book. They did something a little bit different. I think they tried to elevate the medium. They definitely were going for a more adult crowd with this thing. And I don't know how well, I mean, Innovation only is around today, so probably not that well.
94. They got 3 years more after this issue.
Poor bastards. And that just might be because, it's hard to find room on the shelves when you've got Marvel and DC taking up so much of it. And, oh, by the way, in the 90s, there was also Dark Horse.
Oh, dude. Like I said earlier, these guys were fourth in market share, which actually blew my mind because I didn't. Okay, I say I didn't know they existed, but I might have been wrong. Maybe I saw a comic or two on the shelves and I just didn't pay attention to the name. But 91, okay, we got one more year and then Image hits, and then there is a massive amount of companies that start dropping. I mean, We have Impact Comics. I could list a ton of them here. So all of a sudden, where they were number 4, probably on a list of like, I don't know, maybe 10, they're going to be amongst a list of like 30 to 40. So it's going to be tough to continue to have a foothold where you're at to be Innovation Comics. And to see that they went out of, became defunct in 94, it doesn't surprise me because right then and there, it's the height of the speculator boom, and it may even be the bust time of the comics because the Return of Superman happens in 94. Return of Superman, that's the death knell. That's where all of a sudden things start to take a big hit. So that's, again, same year Innovation goes defunct. So you mentioned the art, just real quick before we end up closing up shop here. The art was, just like you said, the painted style, that was pretty nice. Issue 1 was very much, felt like a painted piece, illustrated piece. The art is all over the place, though. Like, some issues there are different artists on each one of these. So I don't know if they are, I think the 2-parter was done by the same artist, but all the other issues are done differently. So they did a fine job, but it's not going to be the same art style in every single issue.
No, and that 2-parter probably has the most traditional comic book art.
I'd agree.
It's the one. It looks like it could have followed in the same storyline and universe as the Kree-Skrull War.
The only other thing I have to say about issue 5 before we clean up, final thoughts and all that, at the end of the issue, obviously, I think we chose a good place to stop because the back matter of the issue is actually paying tribute to the death of Irwin Allen, who died on November 2nd, 1991. This comic was released, or the date down there at the bottom has March of 92. So it probably recently happened when this thing was getting put together before it got on the shelves. But so the creator of Lost in Space passes away. They had a bit of a memoriam page at the end of the issue talking about all his accomplishments. I mean, this guy, Lost in Space might be possibly one of his most famous works, but he did a lot of other things for ABC, CBS. He was in the TV game for quite a while. His Alice in Wonderland miniseries in the 80s was his last production. I think I remember that. Do you remember Alice in Wonderland in the 80s for the TV series? Miniseries? Okay, thanks, Mark. All right.
No, I'm damn it, I'm thinking. I thought you were talking about a comic book, but I actually do remember the Alice in Wonderland miniseries on TV because I remember the Jabberwocky.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. I'm trying to find some stills of it or something. 85?
Yeah, I watched that on TV.
Yeah, same here. Oh, my goodness. So the Alice in Wonderland series came out on December 9th and December 10th. It was a 2-parter in 1985. And I remember this, man. I seriously do. And it's so funny because I would have only had the chance to probably watch it that one time. But yeah, the Jabberwocky, dude, wasn't it like mega scary, right?
Yeah, it was intense.
Okay. All right, Mark. Final thoughts on our 5 issues of Lost in Space. Anything else left unsaid? What are you thinking?
It's definitely for a more adult audience. I think if you're interested in the Lost in Space show, especially if you're interested in the older show and you like comics, you do well to give this a shot. I mean, I'm sure, with online reading sites, whatever, it's pretty easy find these days. And, why not give it why not read a few issues? You might like it. You might want to finish the whole series. It's 18 issues. It's not that much. It's not that long of a series. I would tell you that it's a nice compliment to the old Lost in Space show, and it's a fun one for fans.
All right.
And it's a great way to stay in shape.
All right. Well, I think this is going to bring our discussion of Lost in Space issues 1 through 5 to a close. Mark Radulich, what do we have coming up on the Radulich in Oh, wait a second. Yeah, it's still the Radulich in Broadcasting Network on W2Mnet.com. What do we got coming up?
Right. Yes, sir. All right. Well, like I said, this week, tomorrow, we'll record the Lost in Space Season 2 for a Netflix TV party. Wednesday, we've got Lordy Collection. And on Thursday, we've got a dog trial for Lost in Space 1998, I believe it is. Nothing going on Friday, but lots of boxing this weekend. Kell Brook versus Mark DeLuca. And then we got Gary Russell versus Tug Stoked.
Hey, let me tell you what an old wise man once told me. If you can't say it, just make something up.
Great. Tungsten. That's what I'm
calling
There we go.
Him. That's a great element.
Tungsten Yum Ya over on Showtime. So we might be bringing you both. We might bring you just one or the other. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men, the shadow do. So myself and John War will be bringing you some boxing coverage this weekend.
All right. Well, I don't really have much else to plug here. Hey, Wednesday, February 5th, be on the lookout for a new Unspoken Issues podcast. Me and Chris Armstrong and I discussed Spider-Man number 14. We're going back to the Spider-Man Mark Radulich. Same series. It ended up being the second to last penciled by Todd McFarlane in that series. And we talked some Morbius in a second parter where the black costume ends up coming back. And get this, we have an extra special guest star. That's right. His name is last, but it's extra special. Extra special guest star Gregory Wright sat down and talked with us for about an hour in regards to coloring that comic. And we also got his thoughts on writing Morbius number 12 as well, which was the other option in that poll. So he wrote and colored Morbius 12, and he colored Todd McFarlane's art in Spider-Man issue 14. This guy is a prolific colorist, and he's definitely got some writing chops as well. That is going to be attached. I think that's going to be attached to that episode or airing in a separate episode, but on the same day. So keep an eye out for that. Other than that, I'll let the can plugs do their talking. We will talk to you later. That's Mark Radulich. I'm Jesse Starcher. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thank you very much for joining us. Do not forget to subscribe to our new home by punching in W2M Network on just about any podcast platform to get all of our content into your audio feed. Also, give a like to the Radulich in Broadcasting Network and W2Mnet.com Facebook page in order to stay on top of everything that we have to offer. If you'd like to follow the Source Material Podcast on social media, just follow @SourceMattCast on Twitter, and we are on Facebook @Source Material Comics Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please feel free to share. We look forward to entertaining you again soon.
A little wizard walking around in his orgy pit. Oh, valley of plenty of vaginas. You ready to start this fuck show? I'm ready to take in your valley of plenty.
Yeah. What's your name again? Hi, my name is what? My name is who?
Oh shit, was that your plan? Was to do it that way and I just cut you off like an asshole?
Good. Are you surprised you did that?
No.
Me either. Like you're never on this show, you know? Like nobody expects you. Nobody expects the Mark Inquisition.
Look. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh yes.
2 years. You always talk about like your fast times at Ridgemont High, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, well, shit. I was in grade school at that time.
When do I talk about fast times at Ridgemont High?
That's my generalization of your reference to school days past. How's that?
Aloha, Mr. Hand.
Oh, man. You know what? I've never watched that movie.
All right, we're done. Thanks, everybody.
Nice talking to you, Mark. Thanks for coming on the show. Oh, wow.
Yes, and Fudge will be appearing on Netflix sometime in the second quarter, by the way.
Awesome. Here's to you, Benny Robinson.
Jesus loves you more than you will know.
So let him go.
Let him go. My grandmother used to sing me an Alice in Wonderland song. Alice in Wonderland, come let me take your hand. The Looking Glass, there's a new hate breed coming out.
I'm glad Grandma likes her hate breed.
There's two things I can tell you about my Nana. She didn't like the way Italians were portrayed on TV, and she loves some hate breed. Let me tell you how there's an episode towards the end of the series where Don West and Penny.
Oh no!
And,
no!
And just take
Arnold,
and Judy are separated from those are the two sisters, right? Penny and Judy.
It is Penny and Judy. You got it.
Okay, that's what I thought. Because I remember this episode. They are separated from the crew, and they go back in time.
Oh, okay.
And they land in the 70s on Earth.
All right.
Okay. And they've got to figure out how to get back to their own time. But in the meantime, they've got to make a living. And so
there's got to be money involved. And so they find New York.
No, wait, hang on.
Oh no,
so
this is Times Square, seedy Times Square, 1970s New York.
No, there's nothing like that. It's calm down.
Oh, okay.
This is a wholesome show.
Oh, okay,
so as it turns out, Judy, Penny, and Major Don West move into this apartment building that's managed by the Furleys.
Okay. Three's Company.
Yeah, and Major Don West changes his name to Jack Tripper so to hide his identity. Wow. And he goes out and he makes a best friend, and they go out dancing at the Regal Beagle. There's a lot of hilarity that ensues because this is the 70s, and Mr. Furley doesn't want a guy to be living with two women, but they have to live together in order to figure out how they're going to get back home, right? They have to be working on their time travel spaceship.
How much Three's Company have you watched?
A lot. So, yes, Major Don West has to pretend that he's gay, see? Because the Ropers and Mr. Furley eventually don't want any funny business with Penny and Judy, who are now going by the names of Janet and...
I had no idea that Three's Company was the sequel.
Yes, to Lost in Space.
Unbelievable.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I don't think so. I don't think so.